with it, with everything. Have you noticed? Every moment that your eyes are open and you're breathing and you're conscious, there's a relationship. And so this isn't only about realization. Enlightenment isn't only about peak moments of spiritual understanding. Those are extraordinarily important. But the other phase then will be to actually be able to manifest that. And so to be able to manifest that, well, it takes a tremendous degree of trust, doesn't it? Almost an absolute kind of trust. One of my teachers used to call it like when you had a spiritual awakening, you're a baby Buddha. Do you know? You're a complete Buddha. There's no such thing as half a Buddha. Do you know? Or a little bit of a Buddha. Any more than when there's a baby's born, there's like a half a human being. Because the baby can't crawl or feed itself or do much other than to breathe, it doesn't mean that the baby's like half human, does it? It's a full human being. It's 100% absolutely complete and full. Any parent that's ever had a child knows that. That beautiful piece of infinity you have in your hands is totally, absolutely complete. And yet, it hasn't yet learned how to manifest all of its capabilities, has it? In fact, it can hardly manifest any of its capabilities yet. That doesn't mean it's not complete, it just means it's not yet able to manifest them. There's a certain way, a correspondence to that, to the whole spiritual awakening process. Because when you have, the realization can be complete, but the manifesting itself, you often will feel a bit like a child. You know, and it's very easy for people to go back into old familiar ways of being, especially when they're challenged, because they're familiar. But the way, I guess you could say, forward is to step out and start to live in that sort of question of what does it mean to walk from in the state of presence. I mean, just walk. Just walk out of a room like this. You can walk out of a room like this in your mind, just going blah, 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 blah. The next inner world already being formed, right? I liked it. Oh, this was a great evening or afternoon. Or, gosh, why didn't he stop talking? And on top of that, he made no sense whatsoever. I'm glad it's over. I can't wait to get back home. I'll turn on the TV and have a good meal, and I'll never have to do, That's one way to walk. I think that's the common way, some version. But what is it just to take a single step in absolute presence? In absolute effortless consciousness. Just take a step. Just walk down the hallway. Start your car. What's turning your key? Is it your mind? And is that the only thing that can turn the key? Or can you actually relate and come from and express something different? Can that moment come from something different? You see, because what we usually do is we wait for the big moments. And then people come back to me and they go, Adya, I had this great realization, 6 months ago, and now I have this monumental decision, and how do I know what to do from that state of insight that I once knew? Do you know what I mean? And I understand the question, but what I also understand is if they'd actually paid attention to how that truth, how that presence, how that stillness was moving in all the small ways of their existence, then the big things would take care of themselves. And if you don't, and if you wait till the big ones, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go back into contraction and confusion. You see, so we often are always looking for the big things, the big moments. We think life is about the big moments, do we not? But life really isn't about only about the big moments, is it? I mean, there are infinitely more small moments where we would almost think of moments that are meaningless in a certain sense. Like I said, just walking down the hallway, turning your key in the car, opening the door of your car, closing it, whatever. You think, oh, those are meaningless moments, I won't pay attention to those. I'll pay attention to the big moments. But it's all the small moments that are so important. Because the small moments show you where your heart is, where your devotion is. What are you devoted to? Now, if I was speaking in more religious terms, I could just use different terms because it's all the same thing to me. Are we devoted to God at each moment? Or are we only devoted to God at the big moments when we really want something? Do you know what I mean? But how would God have me walk out of this building? How would God have me open the door? How would God have me turn the key? How would God have me be in the next conversation I'm going to be in? How would that happen? You know, and you can't answer that in your mind because then it would just be another concept. The question actually is meant to elicit that living truth, to elicit the divine rather than to give us answers. Do you know how a question can elicit something in you? Do you know? It's an idea can elicit something in you. Just a single word can elicit experience. Just think the word like love. And if you just think the word love, and just pay attention to your body, there's something inside that will just start to glow a little bit. Unless, of course, you have a negative connotation with the word. Sometimes people do. So a single word can actually elicit an experience. So when I'm putting these things in terms of a question, I'm not saying, therefore you're supposed to get the answer. The question is to elicit the living truth of it. The living truth of it, you see. The Godhead, the Brahman, the Buddha nature, or as the way I'm speaking today is just the truth. But the reason that religions give truth different names, like God and Christ and Buddha nature and all these things, is because there's a way that we're trying to communicate that the truth is not something abstract and cold and distant, but it's actually something of great vitality, great aliveness, which is really what I see, is that's really what people really want. Right? We're always looking for surrogates for real life, do you know? People want an actual, real experience of something with great value, great meaning. That's what the sacred is. That is what to experience the sacred. Is to experience that timeless presence that suffuses everything with a sense of deep value and beauty. But instead of listening to that, we give ourselves surrogates, trinkets, toys to play with, things to distract us, surrogates for true life. Now I'll just end with this because I know I've talked for quite a while. You don't have to do this in this particular way. There's a much simpler way. If you can do this simple way without struggle, internal struggle, trying, which would just be to be still. That's the simplest way. Just be still.